Okay, so uh yeah, so we have functions. It's basically a way to sort of store your code to call it if you want to call it multiple times. Uh yeah, it's just basically to make your code neater in a way. So for functions, right? I think you should have already encountered functions being used in maths. So functions in maths is something that takes in an input and returns you an output. But unlike in maths, functions in programs does not necessarily need an input. It can just be called to return you an output, or actually it doesn't need to even return an output at all. You can just call a function to do a certain to print out a certain thing as well. Yeah. Then if any variables that you define within a function is localized to within the function itself. So the thing is that, for example, okay, I realized that I should probably have introduced to you how to define a function first. Yeah. So okay, so let's look at these first three lines here. You see the addition here basically is the name of the function. So I define a function called addition, which takes in two input, number one and number two. Then what it does is within the function, I create a new variable called result, which basically is the sum of number one and number two. And then what happens is that it will return the number stored in result. Yeah. So this result that I define within the function is localized to the function itself. You cannot access this variable from outside the function. So let's say I print result, right? You will see that Python gives me an error because result is not defined outside of the function. It's only it was only defined within this function itself. Yeah, so you see printing the result, printing the output of the function returns 5, which is 2 plus 3. Yeah. Yeah. So back to the point about localized variables. Yeah. So functions also cannot access variables that we define outside of the function. It can only access the variables that you pass into the function through the inputs over here. Like for example, the number one and number two here, which is the 2 and 3 that I pass to this function. Yeah. And then it's also possible to have functions that consist of two words or multiple words. And in that case, it's also good practice to follow the same naming practice as what we did for variable, where we have either underscore or the subsequent words, the first character we capitalize to be able to clearly show that it is two separate words. Yeah. Then let's say if you use underscore for your variable, it's good to use the other style for the functions to sort of differentiate between functions and variables. Yeah. Then this no output is basically just to show you that, oh, we can have a function that has no input and no output and just do something within the function itself. Yeah, so yeah, this function only prints, it takes in no input and returns no output. Yeah, so I think this took longer than I expected, so I just show you exercise 3. Yeah, so I want to define a function that takes in a positive integer and returns all even number from 0 to the integer in the list itself. So in this case, it will be good to define an empty list first, and then append all the empty, and then append all the even numbers into that list itself. So in this case, yeah, so I define it, and then for I in the range number to +1, the +1 is because range only goes up to number -1. So if I +1, it will go all the way to number itself. Then this is just to check for even, and then append, and then just to append the number, and then I return the list. Yeah. So I see it will return the list of 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, all the way up to 20, because I passed 20 in here. Yeah. Okay, let's say clear and then put. Okay.